experts in different topics, trafficking in persons, labor rights, migration topics. So it is an honor to be in this space. I also would like to thank we will have the presidium members to introduce themselves. And the new game rules that I would like to propose. If you do not agree, just let me know. So my proposal is to make it 5 minutes to present. We would love. 5 minutes. I prefer to then have other conversations. I will take the 2-minute notice 2 minutes before your time is over. So how do we feel? Great. Okay, 50% of the effort is already made. Secondly, we would like to have other comments accepted. I would like to invite those people who haven't participated to please share their experiences, their questions with us. And to have more people doing this, we ask you to please take 3 minutes. My colleagues will be very attentive to facilitate the process. How do we feel? I don't see who is not raising their hands. So to me, it is a pleasure to moderate this session, where we will be addressing some of the very important topics, which is victims of trafficking in persons and victims of labor rights infringements, and how there are resources for these people in the agricultural sector in Mexico. Here we have the presence of experts, hardworking people, people from the public service, from the civil society, and the people who are sitting on the other side of the table of honor. Please tell us your name, the organization.
Bueno, pues mi nombre es Nubia Díaz.
My name is Nubia Díaz. I come from Sinaloa, from the Union of Workers, Agricultural Workers. Which are the needs of the victims of trafficking and infringement of labor rights? One of the most important needs is psychological counseling. There are minors, girls, who have to take care of other siblings brought from the Sierra or the mountains. They are raped in those places where they live in the shelters, and they are not. Sometimes no one knows they are assaulted. And it is not only once. There are people who are surveilling them, and they constantly come after them. And then someone realizes, and this is when the problem is addressed. But they have no psychological counseling. And in order to repair those damages, they are asking for nothing but to simply not to allow that to happen, to be attentive, to probe, to talk to people, to survey people, to simply be able to detect something and progress on. We have a WhatsApp group with a group of agricultural workers and with Polaris. And this is where we share information, and we also want to make radio spots, because this is where people, this is what people normally listens to more. When they are driving, they are listening to the radio. And we want to also bet on communications and information. We want to visit them in their shelters. And to refer people to others, and to refer the cases to the authorities. Thanks, Nubia. A sentence comes to my mind, and I believe it applies to those situations. So no one is asking for things they do not know exist, and no one can be accountable if those people do not have all the elements in order to detect these situations happen. But not having the knowledge, not having the knowledge is something we should all be addressing. And we will continue with Jocelyn now. Thanks, Patricia. Thanks to all of you. Thanks for your presence. I am Jocelyn Reyes, and I work at the Center of Rights for Migrants. I have some audiovisuals prepared, but I will rather focus on the questions. CDM, we are a binational organization, and we support migrants in the United States. We help them defend their rights, mainly those traveling with H-2 temporary visas. And we also help migrants in the United States, those who have a problem at the work site. We offer confidential and free legal services, organizational companionship, and in order to answer the questions and to continue to what Nubia said, in CDM, since I represent those people who work and who face violence, abuse of labor rights, and they also face exploitation and trafficking in persons, we have some needs, and we identify needs that change depending on the circumstances of each person. And sometimes we're speaking about very basic needs. Here I have some points. But for example, speaking about agricultural working people, agricultural workers in Mexico, and speaking about the problems, and as we heard this morning, there is a need to survive. They have the need to survive, and when they face a violence or labor abuse, they need to come out of that situation, and running away could be a risk for them. So there is a need to shelter, to feed those people. What do they do when they live with their daily wages in those very adverse conditions? How can they take action so that they can defend their labor rights if they live in these very poor conditions? So this is my first point. And information. Adequate information for people, information and companionship. And this is something that we observe at the Center of Migrant Rights. When workers, when they file a complaint, they have many concerns. They have many questions. So as the civil society organizations and as other organizations, we should be back up and be endorsed so that we can help those people. Many times, yes, there is a need to translate into the native languages, and we need to offer them a place where they can where they can spend some time. The legal processes, for example. Another very important point is retaliation. When people face retaliation, it is a risk for them and for their families. There are more needs. So in order to speak about restitution, we need to bring the voices, we need to not reinterpret their needs or their experiences. We need to have tools to have access to justice, but after direct efforts, we've been able to do damage restitution, and it is mainly when there are effective legal instruments. Economic restitution, for example, when people can recover their stolen salaries, when there is labor. For me, it is important to say that we need to open the fund. How are we going to interpret those damage restitutions? Because it can go beyond what is economic. Working with workers, in my case, there's a very common phrase when they are asked, why did you decide to take a legal action? Why did you decide to file a complaint? They said, and I quote, I don't want this to happen to others. Restitution is not even something personal for workers. It goes beyond the migration system, the work system in this sector. And there is a need to help them in the luring process, in the contracting, in the hooking process, and then the return, how people are going to be back to their communities, to their places with their families. There are too many areas of opportunity to still speak about all the problems. Here I have 5. How we do preventive work. How do we do prevention, protection, procedures, collaboration, and some points about the public policy. Things. There is no time to explain each one of these points, but it is great to have more interventions. And I also want to listen to my peers. I would like to know what they are proposing. What is the proposal to take care of this very complex problem? Jocelyn, I believe it is very important to change the idea of restitution, because it was understood as an economic concept, and we should speak about restitution of rights. And as you said, and and it is the non-repetition guarantee. Please start thinking your questions and warm your shoulders so that you can raise your hand. And now we're going to give the floor over to Raúl. Thanks. Good afternoon. My name is Raúl Balmaceda, and I come from the Ministry of Labor. And I ask you to please do not kill the messenger. I come from an office that looks like your permanent ally. I would like to tell you that what you have said so far, all this is respected and understood. It is a problem that has happened for many, many years. I really like what something that called my attention is what Margarita said and Daniela Gomez from the Intersecretarial Commission. We've been speaking about, we are attentive to this. So as citizens and as human beings, we are empathetic. I am pleased to work in social provision, work with dignity, where we have my peers, mostly women, and I learn from them every day very relevant topics that have to do with labor inclusion. We have one specific area of labor inclusion coordinated by Teresa Galan with many years of experience in this. We are also the gender equality unit from Previsión Social. We are working with the National Institute of Women, and we also work the National Board to prevent discrimination, where we are in charge of the Mexican standard 025, non-discrimination. I explain all this because there are mechanisms we implement and we do prevention. We believe preventing is very important, and as Patty said, from the restitution perspective of human rights of those who have been victims, and the importance of employers and working people, they need to know the rights and they need to know the instances and where to go to. Here we have heard examples of how important the federal inspection is, and the volume of inspections and the number of people, the number of inspectors who go to different places in Mexico. And despite of the limited resources today, fortunately, with the use of information, systems have been developed, and this is to streamline these processes. I also would like to tell you that we have developed a good labor, a good practice system, and it has three mechanisms. It has the access door to this system. You can show the presentation, but upon Patty's request, I only would like to mention the tools. And if we could later meet and with the different organizations. And it is very, very important to have this dialogue, not only today, it should be a permanent dialogue. So I was speaking about mechanisms, voluntary labor verification program. It was presented in the first quarter of last year, and you will not see it because I am speaking in general terms about the tools. Some of them are voluntary mechanisms, like this labor verification, and it has to do with health and work safety, 45 Mexican official standards, and we see this compliance. We give advice. We are very close to friends from the U.S., represented by Mary Ellison. Chapter 23 of the commercial chapter of the USMCA, and it was a protocol. I'm specifically speaking about one section dedicated to trafficking in persons. This protocol complies with one section of the lower employers should prevent labor infringement and to detect forced labor, the risk, labor exploitation, trafficking in persons. These are dynamic protocols, and this is open. We have shared it in different instances with SEPINA people, with UNICEF, so that we can identify what can be perfect, what is necessary, what should be modified, what you can share with us. Tell us what is not working. We work with another mechanism that is operated. It is a network operated by the National Employment Service. It is a network, and we do inclusion, labor inclusion, specifically in the case of people with disabilities, and to comply with the national system we have. I also would like to tell you that we are checking some very important standards for agricultural workers, the O3 standard. This is one of the very specific cases, and we are also building a new standard after the legal modifications in Article 176. This is something with seen legislative terms, and this is the participation of youth in the field, in the countryside. The ministry bans teen or youth labor. It goes from 15 to 18 years of age with the permission of parents to participate in some activities. So what we will see in this standard is where children can work and where they cannot work. Speaking about machinery, agrochemicals, this is clearly a high-risk activity, and this is why there is a ban that will remain, and we are checking which are the elements that employers should be aware of, and what matters the most is something that has been said here. Please help us communicate, and please help us tell all the organizations in the countryside. This is very important. I've been in some inspections, and what you see there is very complex in the shelters, and the work coordinated by the Ministry of the Interior with Felix Santana. All this effort has been so important. With the collaboration of Daniela, we want to speak about which are the rights, and this is what organizations have said is very interesting. The definitions of what is trafficking, the 11 modes, because to begin with, people do not know what is one and what is the other, and sometimes the authority has questions at the subnational level, and there are no correct files, and this is why care and due diligence doesn't happen. So thanks for the opportunity, and I will be attentive to whatever you want to do or ask.
Gracias, Raúl.
Thanks, Raúl. About your participation, I would like to very quickly rescue the need. I believe we do not have the participation today of the legislative branch, but there is a pending point, and it has to do with legislative regulation and the international standards of international rights, forced labor, and speaking about innovation and in the world of technology, it is not this new, but in the public service, yes, it is possible to be very innovative. For the private sector and the civil society organizations, what is the user-based need to prioritize the needs of people? They are going to be the users of our services, and in this regard, we as an organization, we as philanthropists, as public service, as private sector, we should be trying to resolve those needs. They are not forced to comply with our provisions or what is easier for all of us, so that they can see how the rights are restituted. So we are closing this round with Claudia. Would you please? Can you hear me? Yes. Good afternoon. It is an honor to be here, and thanks for the invitation. I am Claudia Rodríguez Olvera. I am Together Against Trafficking in Persons, and my organization is Consejo Ciudadano. for Justice Citizens Board, for Justice Consejo Ciudadano. We operate a national line, and we also have a chat against trafficking in persons. We are specialized in this topic, and the association Consejo. We directly support people in Mexico City, but we also do it through the lines, and I will be speaking about this specific program nationally. All people can have access to our services, and our aim, our objective today now, in agricultural terms, is we want to come to all possible communities, and I would like to say that in this line against trafficking in persons, one of the characteristics is that it is a 24 by 7, 365 days a year work. We have people specialized in trafficking in persons. I hope we will be able to work always like this. It is a phenomenon, and it is a very severe infringement of human rights. So it is very important to tell this to every corner of Mexico, not only in the urban places, because trafficking in persons and the reports we have received has to do more than this sector in the rural places, in the indigenous communities. How are we going to send them the benefit? We need to have their support to produce these dialogues and this. We are very, very interested. Psychological counseling support counseling, because in the case of victims this is a very severe infringement of human rights. The person gets destroyed. The person is destroyed. Criminals destroy people. They destroy their families and everything around them. And this is so deeply damaging our social weaving. So the technological counseling is via phone. This is the very first contact. We had the very we are the psychological we give legal advice or counseling, and it is something free. What we do not want to charge. What we want to do is to be close to. We want to be close to people, and I already told you more or less what we do. I will give you a flyer or pamphlet, and it is very important, and chat, and those we also evidence. We use chat. Evidence of the cases can be posted in WhatsApp. We are not a prosecutor's office. We will never start, but we can refer cases to those authorities. We can create. We can facilitate this access to authorities. And speaking about trafficking, and speaking about the questions, which are the needs of the victims, there are many. And I believe the most important need, the most relevant, is to know the rights. How come they do not know their rights? So how can we send and give all this information? Labor rights, job with dignity, the right. Since we're speaking about forced migration, in many of the cases, families will completely go to one specific place.
Ya hablaremos de la trata en otro momento, pero bueno, quiero dejar abierto el servicio. La línea es 855.
She is now given the phone number. And we all have this national bilingual service. We have one operator and speaks Mazahua, and our mission and our vision is to offer the service to every indigenous community. Our brothers and sisters and hardworking people are. Thanks a lot. Thanks for this space. And please do not hesitate to reach us. Would you please repeat the phone number? 800 5533
Es la línea y chat nacional.
This is the national line and chat against trafficking in persons.
Creo que también en este panel nos sirve mucho reflexionar acerca.
In this panel, we should also speak about and think in terms of the victims. I believe there's a stereotype of how trafficking in persons victims look like, but it could be even a hindrance. And we need to bring the services they need and they deserve, and we should take care of their own needs.
Inauguramos la sección.
So now we are going to start our
No veo manos levantadas.
Q&A session. I don't see hands raised. Sergio.
Una pregunta, más bien, una propuesta sería que si se trata de preguntas, tratáramos de juntar algunas
Let's try.
para dar paso a las respuestas. Si son reflexiones, pues tenemos nuestros 3 minutitos. ¿Sale?
Gracias. Buenas tardes a todos.
Thanks. Good afternoon. My name is Angelica Barrera. I represent a Stronger Together in Mexico. And my question has to do with restitution mechanisms. This is what Jocelyn said. I would like you to elaborate more on this because we've seen and the work of Consejo Ciudadano is very interesting, very important at the national level, but all this extrajudicial restitution mechanism. So speaking about prevention, it could be very important at the level of government and at the entrepreneurial level. Which are the other ways to have access to restitution? With this intercultural approach, what agricultural workers can have. And we here in Mexico, we speak more than 65 languages, so I would love to know which is the restitution mechanism in the field, considering the digital gaps as well. Because I know we're speaking about technology, we're speaking about WhatsApp, and technology is good news, all but in the field, in the countryside, we still have digital gaps. So how it can be effective in this very complex situation we live in the country.
¿Tomamos otra pregunta? Creo que atrás tu última estaba.
Muchas gracias. Tenemos un comentario.
I have only one comment from the United Nations Office against Office. Thanks, Polaris, for the invitation to this very great event with the participation of many, many allies.
Pues nosotros, como saben,
As you know, we have our mandate is to implement the Palermo Protocol, and we also have cooperation projects. We have had the opportunity to work with mid or halfway projects, always with the Ministry of the Interior, and always working with them. And I have talked to many organizations in this event, and I wanted to learn from you, and this is why we are here for. Now we are implementing change agents. It started in 23 and it will be completed in 26. It will be implemented in several states in Mexico, Oaxaca, Guerrero, Baja California, Mexico City, and others. And in these first approaches and talks with indigenous communities, there is information about forced work and labor exploitation. So yes, we would love to talk to other organizations. We have also talked to El Sindicato. We have talked to many of you, and we also want to have these cooperation projects. And we look for information, we communicate information, we train, we give technical advice for case control. We develop communication strategies and we see the needs. We work in with every type of trafficking in persons.
En el diálogo con más personas que están presentes también el día de hoy. Y bueno, pues mencionarles que pues seguimos implementando nuestros proyectos.
We want to implement our projects, new projects in the years to come, specifically in trafficking in persons. Thanks for your comment, Angelica, because you allow me to speak about damage or restitution in the case of migrants who face all the adversities. So instead of restitution in individual terms, what we need to do is to insist on the most structural restitution of the work in the sector and labor migration, how it is conceived as today. The balance we're listening to is very negative. It's speaking about compliance and enforcing labor rights of working people, and the balance will not change if effective actions are not taken in order to make sure in recruitment there are no illegal quotas or fraud. What about security during transport? And also speaking about compliance and enforcement of rights of working people, just for the sake of being a working people. Wages with dignity. If they do not make enough in order to have a life with dignity, it is not restitution for the families and for the victims and for the communities. So we need to see the relationship between employers and workers, and if the system remains the same with all these structural shortages. We've been speaking about all these problems for many years now, and we've been bringing the same solutions because this structural shortage is not addressed in communities, very poor people. There is no strategy in the community either to take care of women when they are on their way back to their local places. How come when people come back from work, for example, we want them to have the possibility to have a life with dignity, because migration is becoming the only survival possibility. And if we do not speak about policies and strategies that will take care of education in the case of those children in the countryside. So I believe that a strategy can be the organizational process in those communities that always help speak about the strategies and to say what they need and what they would like and how they conceive a life with dignity. If we have this methodology, so it is not possible to generalize how to take care and how to do damage restitution. And we need to have a structure, and we should never generalize which are the needs or the experiences. Hi, my name is Blanca Juarez. I am a journalist and I publish for El Economista. And I would like to follow up something that Margarita said. After all the inspections that were announced, how many are thought for agricultural places? How many inspections were made a year ago, last year? And which is the follow-up? To check labor conditions in non-exporting agricultural sites, because fortunately with USMC, attention is paid on those companies. But there are many delays in those companies that do not export. And in September,
038.
The 038 standard project was published, and which are the observations you have received so far, and when are you planning to publish this standard?
Mira, ¿tú tienes preguntas o comentarios? Oye, ¿tú tienes pregunta o comentario? Comentario. Entonces vamos con la pregunta y después con el comentario. Perdón, que cambié de nombre.
Me llevo sus datos para...
I will take your info, so I will take your contact information so that we can tell you how many inspections in 2023, and you mean 37.
¿Están? Ok. La que yo hablaba. Ok. La norma 38, de acuerdo a lo...
Standard 38, according to the publication, this is in progress.
De normalización, justamente son mis vecinos de oficina. La dirección de normas, revisando algunas actualizaciones.
The office is checking some updates, and as you know, during those 60 days where all the stakeholders participate, all this is published in the official Gazette.
Pues ya tiene un compendio de lo que se ha atendido justamente la
And now there is a summary, so I will also take the contact info, and I can I can give you the information of those who have the info. I only would like to say something.
A lo largo del foro hemos escuchado acerca como de la necesidad de sanción.
We have listened about the need of sanctions and how this is related to labor inspection.
Una capacidad sancional muy limitada. Y a mí me gustaría también cómo llamamos o cómo retomamos
How are we going to retake
el enfoque de justicia restaurativa para
this
no tan solo la
restorative
perspectiva
restitution? It is not only as a sanction or as punishment.
no sé si hay manos también de este lado.
Do we have more hands on this side?
Bueno, creo que todavía uno de los comentarios va justo en la justicia que...
One of the comments is about justice. You don't want me to speak about it. To me, it is important, and it has to do with both things. And something that I have already said is that there are migrant workers with a visa for many, many years. There was one very relevant case, was the program Chamba Mexico, and it is now 10 years, and there was no fair justice process, and we were speaking about 19 states in Mexico, where more than 3,000 workers were affected in several places, and today we're still speaking about the same. So it means that access the general victim law can be very different from the reality. Prosecutor's office in Veracruz, I know nothing about H2 visa, so I cannot accept a complaint. And then what happens? Workers get disappointed.
No solo el desánimo de que el seguimiento a las denuncias no existe. Por otro lado, si
There is no follow-up, and if I file a complaint, then next year I will not be taken to work, because despite of the confidentiality, the reality is that workers and recruiters, which are one of the many intermediaries with H2A visa or H2B, because it includes both sectors, there is a gap. We have the case of Chamba Mexico. To me, this is a case that has to be reviewed at the level of the intersecretarial level, because there were some recommendations that we did with several months of work with the federal government.
Y creo que también la otra es que tiene que ver con la atención a víctimas.
We also have victim care and the internal relationship of victims in San Luis Potosí. There was a case where victims were found with labor trafficking in persons, and the executive committee supposedly reviewed the victims, and there are no access given to them, and this is why the CNDH issued a recommendation 2 years years ago, in December 2022. And one of the recommendations is to tell what is access given to victims.
¿Se les pagó su salario? Sí. Pero ¿cuál es lo que marca la justa la ley de atención a víctimas? Tiene también lineamientos muy concretos.
There are some specific guidelines
Y lo otro,
to take care of the victims.
nada más
And I also would like to speak about H2 visas. I believe it is very important to have mechanisms. What is happening in the northern border when on their way back? In some of the cases that I've seen, workers say that they have to pay here in Mexico. Federal authorities are asking for money on this side. And there are also working people in the United States. Organized crime is involved, and organized crime is charging money to those families who have one or two workers, and they're charging more and more on a yearly basis. So these are costs that should not happen. It is illegal, and this is also by organized crime. And what is the opinion of the authorities? We have Eli and then Luz Maria.
Hola, buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Elizabeth Cabillo.
My name is Elizabeth Cabillo, manager of OXXO Mexico, the Wellbeing Program.
Desde el programa de Bienestar y Trabajo, ubicamos desigualdades.
We found inequalities that produce violations of labor rights in Mexico, and we make proposals to intervene. Intervention will listen to the voice of people who work. One of the we have the agricultural sector, companies and rights and labor inclusion, access to social security, fair salary, life with dignity. And with the companies, we've been working very hard to promote the policy of companies and rights in Mexico.
Nos parece fundamental justamente el tema de reparación.
Restitution is very important. So I would like to know the opinion of the Ministry of Labor. I would like to know about restitution as a preventive measure. We are speaking about prevention, but I believe in a sector where there are all these violations of labor. With this intercultural approach, it is very important to prevention. What happens to not only economic restitution, internal migration and external migration. We have to also recognize the fact that many times this migration is when they want to go to the United States, and then what you can offer in terms of labor justice, access to labor justice, and I believe it has to do with prevention of labor rights. So to me, this is relevant, and I believe this exchange would be fundamental so that in the due diligence policies we built in Mexico, as well as labor promotion and what we see in Sijalbut and with other companies we see in Sinaloa, and they know about their rights, and since there is no restitution and access to justice, there are no fundamental changes, and this is why they do not participate. And I would like to know what is the situation, your opinion.
Bueno, gracias. Yo quisiera aprovechar el foro para comentar
I would like to
y
say
proponer
and
además que se
propose
trabaje en el tema
to work
de la regulación de la identidad de las personas
the regulation of identity of country workers
de sus hijos.
and to regularize the identity of their children, because this is a limitation to access to health services, access to education, and
Los estados de origen principalmente
the states of origin
manejan esta problemática son Guerrero,
are Guerrero, Oaxaca, Chiapas,
Chihuahua.
and Chihuahua. Chihuahua is a region
No se ha abordado este tema.
where this problem hasn't been addressed with people from other states.
Actividades que han realizado, yo tengo conocimiento de las
I know about some campaigns in Sinaloa,
donde también es necesario, ¿no?
but not in other places where it would be necessary. Despite of the regularization campaigns of the identities of workers and their families, some progress has been made, but this is not completed. And the cost, what they have to pay to do out of time registration or later registration, as far as I know, in places such as Guerrero, 2,500 pesos is what they have to pay. In the case of two or three or two people, family, if their identity is not regularized, isn't it a lot? This is one thing, and another thing has to do with identity theft. I believe we need to work in information of workers.
Nosotros lo hacemos desde el sector, sin embargo,
We do it in the sector.
sigue dando, hay mucha suplantación de identidad, personas que dicen
Identity theft.
ser mayores de edad, pues no son, y están trabajando con documentos de primos, de...
They are working with documents of that belong to others, to relatives.
Tengan acceso a sus derechos.
So this is very important so that they can have access to their rights.
Les propongo que podamos cerrar con esta respuesta.
We're going to close with this round of answers, and then we're going to have a couple of minutes for one final intervention. Since the question was for you, Raúl. Yes, we were speaking about restitution. We spoke about the obligation to notify to the authority, the national children system and other authorities. But as I said, we have good labor practices because we want to prevent through mechanisms like the one I already mentioned. We have as health and as labor security. The third mechanism, which is the one I'm in charge of, which is an award in labor responsibility, and it includes others.
Empresa Agrícola Libre de Trabajo Infantil, o México Sin Trabajo Infantil, o el Gilberto Rincón Gallardo, el incentivo.
We have the Rincón Gallardo, DFA, or family responsible company, family-owned business. So this is different recognitions. We are recognizing the best practices. National, we have observed the Global Pact. We have also seen a performance too of the World Bank. And just to give you some elements, things that have been said about the social dialogue, environmental protection, and rights in general of workers. And so this is to comply with the best practices I was speaking about the Standard 25, and together with CONAPRED and in Mujeres, we have the interinstitutional recognition with 14 requirements, and we reviewed 2 of them. It has to do with Article 86, equal wages. Today, the Mexican Standard 025, it is not mandatory. And we currently review the inspection protocols with the human right and gender perspective, and it includes 10 indicators that have to do with the salary equality, maternity and paternity leaves, and breastfeeding. And then we have the 14. The 14 speaks about the adoption and implementation of instruments to prevent, to address, to sanction, and to eradicate labor violence. And this is something we see in the chapter 132, where work sites should have protocols in order to prevent and to address labor violence, and also to identify child and forced labor and trafficking in persons. So we have all these instruments. And as I have already said, all this can be made perfect, and of course with the help of the organizations. Many of you do it, and we really appreciate what you do and your technical assistance through the technical commission. I would like to also thank Polaris and Benite. We were given training on this a year ago. It would be lovely to have it again, and if feasible, to invite all of you. Thanks, Raúl. Nubia, would you like to close? Give us some closing remarks. What we want up in the northern part of Sinaloa is to make it an equal. Try to eradicate child labor, and there we have a problem that you haven't seen here. Up in the hills, they get married when they are 14 or 14, and they have to work because of the need. You have to work, you get married, and this is another thing that happens. Jocelyn. Speaking about prevention, I believe something important we need to work a lot is in terms of transparency. Transparency, we need to work a lot. Transparency, the recruiting processes, hooking, luring, contracting processes, and we need to make this information available to the civil society organizations. It is always useful, and by transparency I mean a data registry a system, which are the companies, which are the who are the workers, where these people come from. Are we speaking about men, women, their ages, and intermediary agents, recruiters, the recruitment agencies? I believe all this information is always necessary, and it also helps a lot prevention, so that we can focus our attention in those places where there are many migrants, and companies and employers should be accountable. It should not only be goodwill, because this is something that has happened for many, many years, and I do believe we need to have legal implications or legal sanctions, so that this is a prevention strategy, and to prevent not to allow abuse. There are examples in other countries. In the United States, we have OSHA. We can work with legal service agencies, and if there is damage, restitution. There are mechanisms to see how this gets, how all this gets adapted. Information in places of origin. There should be security for those who work on this. By security, I mean how are we going to share this information in violent places where organized crime is present. And this is something that affects when giving them the information. So it is a very complex situation. Thanks for all your attention.
Bueno, retomando un poco también el tema de la reparación del daño.
Damage restitution
En toda política
in
pública,
all public policies,
contexto de,
there should be
¿cuál es la
a context. We need to identify the problems of each place because at the end of the day, this is going to be what take us to policy guidelines which are going to be better defined. What do I mean by this? If we're speaking about a sector that is facing a situation of vulnerability, an important situation of vulnerability, and if there is loss of educational background and
tiene que ser con la lupa de la, obviamente,
in basics, we need to look at it in terms of human rights and all the policies that happen.
y a mano a este tema, no podemos perder de vista que
We should not forget that we are facing a topic of discrimination.
humanos por completo.
It is a discrimination, and we have defined this in human rights. And now, listening to the different comments, yes, there are places where with no access to technology.
Precisamente por eso nos
But
interesa mucho
this is why we are so interested in,
las personas que con el
of course,
en el contexto en el que se encuentran,
in the context where this happens, give them the opportunity to have access to justice. And here there are three important points that I would like to underscore. Speaking about trafficking in persons as such. Recruitment. Yes, because this is what the need, poverty, families that need to go from one place to another. This is what they do. These people have such a power of manipulation. People want to work, or people want to bring something to eat, and if someone comes and promises a radical change in life, yes, I can feed you. I need it. And this is where violence and coercion, this is where all this starts, and labor exploitation. So it is very important to give this information prevention for us. According to my opinion, it is very, very important because it is basic information. And because sometimes we just listen to information, but it is very useful information. If you do not know your rights, how are you going to come ask for them? If I do not know information, how am I going to enforce my rights? So I believe it is very, very important to take all this into consideration. And security as such, we're speaking about national security, people who are being lured by the organized crime. And I need more time, but we can speak about this later in much more detail. And we hope all those actions can be a reality.
Claudia, tu tocaya, Valentina, que nos puedan ir acompañando acá para hacer el cierre. Mientras tanto, el aviso parroquial, vamos a tener unos box lunch acá afuera.
And there's going to be box lunch after these conclusions.
Espacio para poder platicar más ampliamente.
So we will have the possibility to speak. And thanks to this table of honor and members of this table.
Bueno, ya sé que todos estamos
I know
súper cansados, cansadas.
we're all very, very tired, and the only thing we want to do now
Retomar algunas de las ideas.
is to retake some of the ideas we
Bueno, de hecho, les adelanto
presented
que,
today.
Entre las personas, entre las organizaciones que otra vez
Some of the
organizaron
organizations that organize this event, we're going to follow this up because we have some proposals for all of you. So please keep in touch because we want this very rich group speaking about all these different things. We would love to make very specific proposals. So please, we will keep you posted. Now I will give the floor to my colleagues so that they can officially close the three sessions. I will make a summary of the first session. I have some notes. I will, in the first one, we were speaking about conversation, about the ethical recruitment practices with people from the Desierto International Migration Organization, IFORES and Verite. So there are three main conclusions. The first one has to do with the characteristics to be considered in a responsible recruitment, and recruiters should make sure information is available about labor conditions, and the second one is the cost. In every case, all this should be paid by companies, never the workers. The workers should never pay it, and we spoke about the role of indebtedness, how to create conditions for forced labor, what happens in those cases, and intermediaries, why companies are evading responsibilities. A lot was said about banning work of children doing agricultural activities, the recent reforms to the general labor law, and some of the conditions and infringements in the agricultural sector today, and the conditions why minors, why people work, and the lack of infrastructure, school infrastructure to offer alternatives, the lack of salaries with dignity, and unpayable fees to join a school. And another important thing is the public and private sector. They should be responsible to guarantee labor rights of migrant agricultural workers, and labor inspections from a preventive approach, government support programs for agricultural workers to improve communications and governmental mechanisms to have access to labor justice, and to make sure salaries are fully complied with, to have transparent contracts, access to social security, and to look at the actions to prevent violence, on how to pay attention to women, to how they need to take care of others. Migrants, organizations of migrants. And I would like to close by to say that doing an analysis of the context, this is something very important. Human mobility, forced displacement, and climate change, and impact in agriculture.
a todas las colegas que han
And I would like to
organizado
thank
este foro
the
con
organizers
muchísimo
of this
esfuerzo,
forum
dedicación,
with all
cariño.
this effort,
Entonces, a todos los
dedication.
colegas del equipo
All the
de
colleagues
Periplo y
from
Avina, si quieren
Periplo and
levantar su
Avina,
mano,
would you please raise your hands? No, not your hands. Would you please
a los colegas del equipo de Fósforo que acompañan desde la
stand
comunicación
up and
electoral.
let's give them a round of applause. Fosforo, would you please raise your hands? Oh yes, raise your hands. And of course, people from Polaris.
Al equipo del Institute for Human Rights and Business.
The team of Institute for Human Rights and Business.
Finalmente,
And last but not least,
a la OIM.
the Organization of International Migrations. International Organization for Migrations. You did a great summary. I will simply give you 5 ideas to think in terms of proposals. Here we have spoken about government, how to make sure that labor or international agricultural people, and something that we need to do.
Hay muchas propuestas de reclutamiento ético, tanto de trabajadores internacionales, solamente de trabajadores internacionales. Entonces ahí hay una deuda grande con lo que está pasando dentro del país. Ojalá que estas iniciativas también existieran para trabajadores jornaleros internos. Obviamente, pues, o sea, la parte de inspección, ya lo dijimos, es medular, fundamental, y lo que nos parece más importante es que se incrementen las inspecciones de trabajo en los campos agrícolas, que haya información alrededor de qué se encuentra. Obviamente necesitan mucho presupuesto, muchas cosas.
Lots of budget is needed, many things are needed, and to start the inspections in agricultural places, and there are some, it will not necessarily be transnational companies. There is a need for inspections in those places where there are international workers, people from Guatemala, from Honduras, from everywhere. They do not know their labor rights, and here we have a huge problem, how people need to learn about their labor rights. And last but not least, something very important, to have intercultural justice mechanisms.
Un problema muy grave, una deuda histórica muy grande. Es muy importante que las personas trabajadoras indígenas puedan tener mecanismos para acceder a la justicia, sea, bueno, obviamente en sus propios idiomas. Y ahí tenemos, no sé, el sistema judicial tendría que estar pensando en mecanismos que permitan esto.
Mechanisms that would allow for this.
Bueno, muchas gracias a todos y a todas. Igual yo también
Thanks to all of you, and on behalf of the International Organization for Migration, thanks for your presence. And as my colleague says, we are all tired, but we are here because we're all on the same page, with a value, with an idea, with a common objective. And I believe, regardless of what we can understand and take from this, the importance of this conversation is to analyze the perspectives of others and to, in light of the efforts we make at the personal level and institutional, in our institutions, in our perspectives, we need to analyze the different efforts, and we need to know how to join, how to have this sense of ownership. And as Claudia, I will be very concrete. I will be speaking about the last session. We spoke about the importance of analyzing prevention of trafficking in persons, the perspective of migrants, because we speak about it, and not being able to work with these regulations. And at the end, we spoke about how to work with a language that will be better in transparency terms, and how all this should be given to people, and how it can be adapted depending on the circumstances. We're speaking about the northern border and these internal migrations that will respond, that will have other needs to facilitate access. And all the, we've been speaking about rights, and we spoke about people, and as we know, people do not defend what they do not know, what if they are not aware of that. People do not know where to go, they do not know the rights they have. Access to restitution and modalities and how to facilitate this through technologies. We know we have institutional limitations. Some institutions are smaller, others are bigger. We cannot be everywhere, but this is something we should take as an assignment. How can we expand so that we can use other means, how we can work with other platforms and work with other institutions. And we need to have all these tools, and in order to send this information and these new ways or this specific private means, work with them and bring all this information to all of them. It doesn't mean we also spoke about some efforts for people in the case of indigenous people, indigenous languages, access, and how to improve all these efforts. And we also spoke about the importance of regularization of identity and prevention. It should be a way to prevent. Something that I would like to also say at government level, how important it is to make preventive efforts visible, and maybe for those who are not immersed in that, we need to be able to recognize them, because we speak about many standards, the ones of the Ministry of Labor. They are not all in our radar. How we analyze, how we know them, how we can be with them, our efforts. We want to be with them in a way that we want to be able to facilitate rights and to guarantee rights of people and be able to prevent labor trafficking and trafficking in every aspect. Not only in agricultural workers, but in all migrant workers. Thank you very much. I only would like to the colleagues at the interpretation booth. Thanks for being so patient, and we have box lunch on the way out. And the idea, if you want to go, that's great. If you can stay a little bit longer, we can stay here, we can go outside. And thanks to the Commission of Human Rights of Mexico City for giving us this space and for contributing, for helping.
Yo creo que sí. Sí. Gracias a todos. Gracias. Sí.